I think of you as a researcher, but you've also been uh, doing research in the field,
Yeah, field work.
field work.
The Jane Goodall of
Yeah, yeah, right.
sex work.
How did you get? What's the short and the long story of how you got into sex work?
How did I get into sex work? Well, there's a whole like childhood thing where I was conservatively homeschooled. Uh,
Do you want to actually talk about your childhood? I think it's interesting because you also worked at a factory. So, like, your
yeah.
childhood is really fascinating and difficult, traumatic. So, and you've written about it. There's a lot of ways we can talk about it, but maybe what are the things you remember, the good and the bad of your childhood, of your maybe interaction with your father?
Yeah, my dad probably has narcissistic personality disorder, and so it was very centered on very controlling childhood, immensely so. We were homeschooled and pretty isolated from the outside world. Like we didn't know anybody else who wasn't homeschooled. We went through a program called Growing Kids God's Way, which was it was like the kind of program where you're not supposed to pick up babies when they cry to train them that they can't manipulate the parents, because like baby crying was viewed as like you're just teaching them from an early age that they're allowed to make the parents do what the kids want.
Yeah.
And we're very against this philosophy. So, that combined with a narcissistic personality disorder, dad was pretty rough.
So, controlling
Super controlling, yeah.
and developing and feeding the self-critical aspect of your brain.
Yeah, very much. It was, I was like lazy. I was never going to accomplish anything in life. I was going to move out of the house and realize how good I had it at home, the classic stuff. He was very like logical and smart though. And so he would also like teach us logic stuff. I remember some of my earliest memories are him like giving me basic logic puzzles. Like the dog has 3 legs, how many dogs have 4 legs? And I would mess up but he was a evangelist, basically a Christian evangelist. So we did like Bible study 5 nights a week. I memorized I think 800 verses of the Bible by the time before I became an adult. Um, yeah, it was very patriarchal also. So I was expected to grow up and become a housewife. Basically, they're like, oh, you can go to college to meet a man and also to get a little bit of education so that you can homeschool your own kids. Like we were explicitly told that women were subordinate to men. In regards to like making decisions when you're married. Our pastor's daughter was not allowed to leave home because she would be outside of the authority of a man. So when she got married, she was allowed to leave because she was never allowed to live in a house where she was not under a hierarchy. So this is like the kind of culture that we live
So there's
in.
a hierarchy, and there's a gender aspect to the hierarchy. There's men at the top of that hierarchy.
Yep. Men at the top.
Okay, but your own psychology, your own mind. So most of that self-critical brain is bad, right?
It was confusing because he told me that I was smart, but also that I would fail.
Right.
But I
But
think
not smart enough, right? Or like smart but not smart enough. Is
smart,
that
but like not virtuous or something.
okay? Okay, right. There's always a flaw.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's always a flaw. I think a lot of it was a lot of the fucked upness of my brain came from feeling like I didn't have the authority to think because it was so like carefully like suppressed. Like my ability to like express or have any sort of power was just absolutely annihilated. Like systemically, like psychologically, they would do like psychological torture mechanisms to make sure that like I wasn't actually thinking on my own
So
or like being able to deviate from anything anybody ever told me, to the degree that it's still ingrained in me. Like I once was with a friend, we were traveling and he wanted me to hop a turnstile. It was like very late at night. The train was here and I could not physically force myself to do it. Like he was like yelling at me like, come on, do it. Like, no, but I was trying so hard to make my body cross the line. And it's like embedded in my physical being to like be unable to do stuff like that, which is really annoying.
you're not free to take action in this world.
Yeah, some of them. So it's that was I think the most annoying part of my upbringing.
Would you classify it as like suffering?
At the time, yeah, definitely. Well, it's confusing because like when I was a child, it was just painful in the sense that like things suck, but it was placed in a meaning framework, right? Like it is good, it is virtuous to submit to your parents and do what they want. If they tell you to say goodbye to your best friend forever and never talk to them again, you go do that without complaining. And so like I would go do something like that and I would like it would suck. It really was like concretely painful, but it was also placed in this narrative where I was like fulfilling some sort of greater purpose.
Sure.
And so it's very confusing to refer to it as suffering because there's so many painful things we do today that are placed in the narrative of a greater purpose that like I think I would agree with. Like I go get a medical procedure done, and that sucks, but I'm like, this is helping me in the long run. But like say if I got abducted to an alien planet and they're like, by the way, all of those medical procedures you got done, like you didn't have to get them done. Those are totally unnecessary. Then I might get really upset about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust those aliens though, because they probably want to do different medical
This
procedures
is
on
true.
you. I saw, I saw a thumbnail for a video that I'm proud of myself for not clicking on about a man who has claimed that he had sex with aliens. And I was
Proud of
like,
yourself for not clicking on that?
because I was wondering, because I would probably watch it for like 20 minutes, and then I should be doing work.
Oh, I see.
So like and I'm actually happy because I get to imagine what is all the different possibilities that it could have been for that man who had
Do you
sex
have
with
like a
aliens.
really high like resting happiness state?
Yes, yeah.
That's
Probably like a mushroom state, yeah.
Wow. Do you do mushrooms?
I've done mushrooms before. It was very awesome,
Cool.
but like more intensely awesome. But like because I was just looking at nature, it makes nature even more beautiful, I
Mhm.
think. But it's already pretty beautiful. I haven't done MDMA.
Mm.
People say that I should.
It's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but I'm already what did you call it? Resting happiness state.
High resting
Yeah.
happiness.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. But it's not like some of it is genetic that you're able to notice the beauty in the world, and some of it is practiced where you realize focusing on the negative things in life, like unproductively, is it just doesn't help your mind flourish. So like you just notice that, and it's like, I mean, I think people with like depression learn that, or like probably with trauma too. Is like there's certain triggers. Like if you suffer from depression, you have to kind of consciously know there's going to be triggers that will spiral, like force you to spiral down, and so just avoid those triggers. Some people have that with diet, with food, and so on. And so I just don't like whenever there's shitty things happening or shitty people, unless I can help, unless I can somehow help. Like why focus on it? Yeah. Anyway, back to your upbringing. What was the journey of escaping that?
I left home like kind of early because my dad and I were not getting along by the time I was a teenager. But I still Christian for a while, and I lost my faith after I think I moved it away, and I started having friends that weren't religious or like weren't raised in this super conservative environment that I came from. And I think I this was not conscious at the time. This is my hindsight story, but I believe that like being exposed to a culture in which I had the capacity to believe, like allowed my brain to actually seriously consider the thought that maybe all of this stuff was untrue, that I'd been taught like 6,000-year-old Earth and evolution is a lie, macroevolution and all of this stuff. Because like when you're immersed in an environment like that, I don't think you actually have a choice. Like your brain has to believe these things because this is a survival thing. Like if you believe this, you'll be like if you believe the wrong thing, you'll be totally cast out. Even if they're not going to cast you out, you're going to be cast out in like communion with others because we were always told that you can't like trust non-believers. Really, they don't have a moral compass. They're going to screw you over. And so I'm like, oh, I can't be that. Like everybody's going to outcast me internally.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't think I actually had the capacity to seriously question my faith, even though I thought that I was questioning it quite hard until I got into an environment where it was safe to do so. And once I started being able to make friends who were not religious, I'm like, oh, if I lose my faith, I'm still going to have some sort of community. And then at that time, I went through some questioning, and then I lost my faith.
So in that, given your friends, given your situation, you now have the freedom to think, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or
at least the ability to think of something that was acceptable in the new culture. Yeah.
Without, I mean, is there a danger of like adopting the beliefs of the new culture? So like, there's some aspect of just being able to think freely, which you weren't able to do when you were growing up. Just to think, like look at the world and wonder how it works, that kind of thing.
But I mean, you were, but within certain boundaries. Like there are certain basic assumptions. And as long as you were following those basic assumptions, which is, to be fair, is like kind of what we're doing now. Like I gone and done the personal research that like evolution is the thing that's going on? Have I looked at like the age of the stones? No, I haven't. I'm trusting other people.
Yeah.
Which I think is like a fair choice to make given where I'm at right now.
But you're also assuming like there's causality in the universe, time is real,
Yeah.
that first of all, the thing that your senses are perceiving is real. You're assuming a lot of things.
Yeah, I think like it's better just to become aware of the assumptions you're making, like as opposed to not making those assumptions at all.
Mhm.
Like you have to assume something. And I did, it's very suspicious, right? That I went out of this very conservative culture. And now I guess I don't believe things that are super in line with the current culture. I think this is why I feel a little bit safer right now, because like when I was Christian, I believed generally Christian things. But now I believe a bunch of things that like people really hate. Like I get canceled online all the time.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, this is a sign that maybe you're thinking independently if you're like able to think things that are completely at odds with the people around you. And to be fair, this is a little bit easier to do when it's like general culture, but it's much harder to do with your peer group, like the people that you trust, your friends, the people whose opinions you respect. Like disagreeing with those people is very difficult, and I'm not very good at it.
Yeah. I do think that if you establish yourself as a person who can be trusted and is a good human being, you have a lot more freedom to then explore ideas that are different from your peer group. So like those seem like if you separate the space of ideas versus some kind of like deeper sense of what this person is, like they're an interesting and trustworthy and good human being.
Well, like, is there somebody that you respect who you consider significantly smarter than you? And can you imagine believing an idea that you've heard them talk really disdainfully about?
Mhm.
Like, how
Yes.
would you feel coming to me
Yes.
like, I believe this thing that you find to be?
Yeah, I do all the time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
you may be braver than me. And to be fair, I support doing this. Like, I try to do this, but I think like like subconsciously, I
Oh,
notice that I don't do it as much, and so I'm suspicious of myself. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I'm hiding to myself like actual curiosity about things that might deviate from my peer group, because I notice that I'm not actually deviating with them as much as I do with the outside world.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like, because I do see most people I interact with as smarter than me, but I also have this intuitive feeling that uh, dumb people, which I consider myself being, have wisdom. So, like, in the disagreement, actually, I also believe in the power of conversation and in the
Mhm.
tension of disagreement. So, I think even just disagreeing from a place, from a good place, from a place of like love and respect for each other, I think I just believe in that. So, it's not like individuals you're disagreeing; you're like working towards arriving at some deeper truth together, right? Even if the other
Mhm.
person is smarter. Maybe that's how I justify it for myself. I'm also a fan of conversations because like I've seen just listening to conversations, it seems like a great conversation more emerges from it than the sum of its parts, right? Like somehow two people together can do like that dance of ideas can somehow create a cool thing. By the way, I saw a video of you dancing
Mm.
at a bar drunk. It wasn't the bar drunk. He didn't look drunk, but just the dancing.
Oh,
It was like ballroom dancing type of thing. I was like,
yeah,
yeah.
something like that.
I've been doing a bit of tango dancing. I
Oh,
like it.
really? Argentine?
Hmm.
Nice.
I like stuff with the body in general, like wrestling or combat. Like usually when there's a tension, you have to understand the mechanics of how two bodies move when they're in conflict. And dancing is
Yeah,
similar.
sure. Like you have to do like rapid thinking
Mhm.
also, like rapid intuitive physical thinking. And that's my favorite kind of thing.
Mhm.
Like a lot of exercise is really boring to me because you can just do it while your brain's off. But something like ballroom dancing or fusion dancing, like you have to constantly be like figuring out like it's a rapid puzzle. And that's
What's
so
fusion?
wonderful.
What's fusion dancing?
That's the video. It's fusion dancing is like if you have any sort of dance background, you can come and you just kind of mix those together.
Oh, you
So
just
you can have
kind of
like people doing
improvise.
ballet with people doing
Cool.
ballroom with
That's
people
fun.
doing blues.
Cool. And then there's an interesting dynamic because I don't know, maybe you can correct me, but there's that's very meta. There's usually a lead and a follow.
Hmm.
I guess most dances have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so but both have a different, like you both have to be quite sensitive to the other human being, but in a different way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So I like both that there is that definitive role,
Hmm.
but also like it's not somehow that one is better than the other. There's an interesting tension between the two. Yeah.
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 It's good because it's like a basic rule set that allows for a ton of expression. I've recently started to experiment with like reverse leading. It's not like back leading. It's like I don't know. Like sometimes I'll like
So you can
lead a
lead as a
move.
follow. Oh, you can.
When I'm typically following, I'll like occasionally throw in a little lead here and there.
But don't you kind of always? Oh, I see. But don't you hint at a lead when you're following? Like, don't you just by the dynamics of your movement, you're not perfectly following. I mean, because there is like the lead is listening to your body, right?
Yeah,
So like you're kind of both figuring out what you do next.
that's true. I'm a very good follow though.
Okay.
So I'm
interesting.
I'm an invisible follow. You do a move. It's like
Oh, interesting.
I'm not like good at technique.
I didn't know those existed. Like a perfect follow.
Oh, yeah,
So you could perfect follow.
I'm really ideal. I'm not great at technique, and sometimes I'll fall over. But like with the following part, I'm very good at it.
Do you enjoy following?
Yeah, it's really nice. Again, like it's a very fast physical puzzle you have to solve. It's like typing. I really like typing. That's why I was inquiring about your keyboard earlier.
Why do you like typing?
Because it's like the very fast, like the really rapid response. What's the reaction time? I like things that like have very fast reaction times, like games like that.
But typing is not a reaction, or is it the brain generating words and then you're like, how's typing a reaction?
Well, okay, the sensation that I get when I am typing is the kind of thing that I'm trying to point at. So maybe reaction time isn't I don't know what the term is, but whatever that thing is, like the thing where you have to like look at a word and then communicate it into your fingers.
Yeah,
it feels like dancing.
Like you're responding to your brain. Your fingers are doing the responding to the brain that generated the words.
Yeah, making your body do what your brain wants it to do, but like fast and precisely.
Well, then you might not like this Kinesis keyboard because it makes it easier to do that. You probably like the struggle, right?
No, well, I mean it looks hard because it looks like it's high depression on the keys.
No, it's well. Oh, I see. Yes, more than like a laptop keyboard, but like that you don't have to. One of the main things is you don't have to move your fingers at all. So like, for example, a lot of people that I think they have a backspace up in the top right corner.
Yeah.
And so if you have to make mistakes, which is like, I mean, that's like so metaphorical. Like every mistake you have to like really hurt yourself for. You have to like stretch for the backspace.
So there's that poetic narrative again.
It
emanates from like a lot of your perspective.
Everything. Yeah. No. Yeah. I don't. And I see it as a good thing. It's a good a romantic element permeates my interpretation of the world. Yes, but you left home early.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up working at a factory?
Well, I tried to go to college but failed. Couldn't afford it.
Did you like it?
I remember it just being really slow. I remember being shocked that the teachers didn't care. Like I was used to homeschooling.
Yeah.
And where I don't know, like it just like it meant something. It felt like the people around me that were teaching me, because we had like a mom's group also, like directly cared about what I was learning, and I would be able to ask questions and they would like really respond.
What's a mom's group?
It was like a homeschooling group, so where a bunch of moms who are homeschooling their kids get together and then teach each other's kids.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And they have different like interests and capabilities and so on, and they kind of.
And sometimes if some of the kids are really good at something, you have like the older kids teaching the other ones too. So it was very like everybody kind of figures out what they can good at, and they share that skill set with everybody else, which I think was a pretty great setup. Honestly, I think my childhood kind of sucked in a lot of ways, but homeschooling was excellent for me, mainly because it just had so much free time. Like I did like 2 to 3 hours of school and then did whatever the fuck I wanted for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And I got to actually pursue skills that are still useful for me to this day. So
even in that constrained environment.
Mm-hmm. Like I read fantasy books and I wrote so much. And now I'm writing a lot on my blog. So
what kind of fantasy books? Like sci-fi type stuff?
Like classic. Like I read like Mercedes Lackey and the E.E. Knight and Ursula Le Guin. And
I don't know any of this. What is this? What is it? Is it like a romantic thing? Or is it like a romance?
Just all the fantasy books, like dragons and
dragons.
Spells.
Got it. You didn't mention Tolkien for the fantasy.
I read Tolkien.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's beautiful. So you through all the dragons. How did you end up in a factory? You try school.
Yeah. Try school. Had to drop out for a couple months, and then I was like, well, I'm poor, and I was ready to take any job. I was like applying for sewer jobs, and then I got a factory. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Because my parents no financial help at all. They're like, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, you know. So anyway, I went to work at a factory, and that sucked ass. Do not recommend. We had to wake up like 4 a.m. You know, work on weekends too. fluorescent lights. It was terrible. And so I did that for about a year. And I was like, I was trying to grit my teeth and be like, this is my life, right? I didn't have high expectations for my life. I was just like, I thought like if you get a job where you don't have to be on your feet all the time, that's you're living a good life. But and then I got another job briefly as a photographer, and then they fired me. I think I was 19 at the time.
Fired you for like?
I was just too young, and really really bad at interacting with people in the outside world. Like I was pretty well socialized as a homeschooler with other homeschoolers, but in the outside world, especially with all of the like hierarchy submission stuff beaten into me, like literally beaten into me, it was very difficult for me to interact with other people who were like older than me or had any sort of confidence at all. So they hired me to do like photography for people, and then I was rapidly turned out that I was bad at this, and so they fired me. But at that point, I'd left my factory job. I'm like, I can't go back to the factory. So I had some savings, and I slept on friends' couches, and I tried various self-employment stuff. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do product photography or something. But no, it's Idaho, you know, nothing. And if you're like a 19-year-old with no experience in the outside world at all, it was really difficult. And so I had a friend recommend that I try becoming a cam girl. So that's how it started.
What is camming? What is being a cam girl? What's that
Camming
involved?
is like you talk to the camera live on the computer, like you live stream. It's kind of like Twitch. And then people are typing in the chat like, hi, do this stuff. And then the people can tip you money. And then you can do things in response. Like, oh, if you tip me 100 tokens, you know, I'll take my shirt off or something like that.
And like, what site were you using at that time?
My free cams.
My Free Cams?
Yeah.
Is that a popular site?
Yeah, it's pretty popular.
Okay. And how did, what were the next steps? Like, did you enjoy it?
Oh, well, it was the first time I had actual control over my life. And I made like actual real money. And so I just exploded into it. I thought about it nonstop. I was streaming all the time. I was like coming up with like new creative things. And the thing is like, I don't know, there's something about public school that I ended up living in a house of cam girls full of other girls who had gone to public school. And I don't know how much of it's genetic or like just because I'm weird or is it because of our upbringing. But I felt like I was much more fearless and much more weird and creative online than other people were. Not because they weren't awesome people, but because I think like public school, I got the impression based on them talking about it, that it sort of like beats out any sort of deviance from you. Like
more so than because I got the...
Oh yeah, we had moral deviance was beaten out, but like you could do whatever.
Creative deviance.
Creative deviance wasn't so much. Like I didn't have other kids making fun of me ever. I don't think I'd ever heard an insult about my physical appearance as a child or teenager. Once.
So your father was basically saying you're not good enough was intellectual.
Oh no, that was like moral failing.
Moral failing.
Yeah, like I was not virtuous. Not sufficiently virtuous.
Wow.
Like in various ways, like you know, like you're lazy and mostly the lazy part. I have like ADHD or something. Yeah. And I was not good at it as a kid either. I would just totally forget all the time. And
is there some sexual repression aspect to that? Like you know how they say that there's it's not just homeschooling, but just like Catholic girls and so on, just because like there's you're forbidden to do certain things. Like there's a kind of liberating feeling of saying like basically rediscovering yourself, rediscovering your freedom by doing just diving head first into sexuality, into your own sexuality. Is there some aspect of that?
Yeah, absolutely to some degree. I think that like people kind of model it slightly wrong. Like I think there's a truth to it. But when I first got out of the house, for me, freedom was like going outside at 2 a.m. Or like eating chocolate, you know, on days that I previously wasn't allowed to eat chocolate. Like that was like a really intense expression of rebellion for me. And I think people like don't think of this. Like I got out a lot of my like intense rebellion through things that people don't typically consider to be rebellious at all.
Sure.
Like I wore a bikini.
Yeah.
Insane.
And just like walked around in it and like, I can do this.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And so like this was most of that emotional processing for me. And I took me a couple years from leaving home and all of that conservative culture into doing sex work. In the meantime, I did try having sex with a lot of people, but this was mainly because I didn't know what the norms were. I didn't really understand. I was just like, okay, take things logically, take things one step at a time. And I'm like, okay, if the whole previous set about like how I'm not supposed to kiss somebody until the altar of marriage, if that's not the way that things are supposed to go, then what is the way things are supposed to go? And I was like, well, if I am aroused, I should go have sex with someone, right? Is there any reason not to? No. So I would go around asking random people to have sex with me.
Did you have any peer pressure saying like that's not good or that is good, or like did you feel any currents of society in any direction? Or you independently just thinking like from first principles?
I think I mean like I'm not saying it was a totally a clean thing. I'm sure that I was experiencing society telling me this is bad, but you have to know like I wasn't watching normal movies when I was a teen. Like we watched Christian movies. Our the stuff that we watched was filtered. Like I watched the Titanic and I had no idea that Jack and Rose had sex because it was put through a filtered.
Wait, did they?
Yeah, they went and he painted her naked and
Yeah.
there was a scene in a car on the ship.
Car? Oh, on the ship.
Yeah, they had like storage cars in storage, and there's a hand. I watched it again later, and I was like,
I don't
oh my
remember the
God.
sex scene. That's
Well, maybe were you also put through a
no,
filtered version?
Maybe it's the filter I see. Like, did the couple in the Notebook also have sex? Because maybe for romantic movies, I focus on the romance. Maybe, right? And the sex scenes are always like weirdly filmed in these.
Yeah.
Because it's never, I mean, it feels more like romance than sex. I guess that's the main focus of this, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, anyway. So they had sex. It's good to know now.
They did.
I'll
I'm
go
letting you
back
know.
and watch now.
You have your
to
own
fact
personal
check.
filter on your brain.
And once you realize that there are some, like the foundation of your beliefs were wrong, then everything might be wrong. And you kind of just doing from first principles.
First principles, basically. And again, like not totally separate from culture, but also I think in general, I also have a predisposition to just be like, fuck what culture tells you. Just figure out what's right for you and do it. And so that mixed with, the figuring things out from first principles. I did eventually figure out that I didn't like having casual sex with just anybody quite as much. So I stopped that, but it took me a while to figure that out.
What's the negative of casual sex?
It's just like not good. I mean, if you like figure out the chemistry you have with someone better, then it can be a lot nicer. But I wasn't doing that. I was just like somebody I met and I'm like, you seem kind of cute. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't bother to try and develop just any chemistry. I mean, I didn't
chemistry
know.
Even outside of sex, just chemistry, like human chemistry,
Yeah,
like
just basic
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like kind of cringy, but I would like walk up to guys or send them messages like, would you like to have coitus? Is what I would say.
You would say coitus.
I had said that.
I mean, it's kind of cute in a way.
It's a girl asking you to get laid, so they probably didn't care that much. But anyway, I'm saying that like I had a lot of rebelling out of my system by the time I started sex work.
Yeah.
So like for me, like maybe I'm sure it was somehow related because we were extremely sexually repressed growing up. I remember the day I learned I had a vagina, which was absolutely horrifying. Do not recommend figuring out you have another orifice in your body. But like,
do you want to share the process of you figuring out that you had a vagina?
They told me I had a vagina.
Oh, like intellectually, like there was somebody said
you have
a vagina.
Vagina, yeah.
And that was horrifying to you.
Yeah, I didn't know I had. Because you weren't supposed to ever like touch or look at yourself ever. So I never did. It was really disgusting. And so I had no idea that what was going on in my genital region. And so one day my mom sat me down, I think it was like 9 or 10. And she was like, there's another
what?
And you're going to bleed out of it, is what she told me.
Well,
you're going to bleed out of it for a while. And I was like, what the fuck, Mom? I didn't know what the word fuck was, but I would have said that if I had known.
When did you first learn the word fuck?
Oh, I think I learned it when I was at a playground and it was written somewhere and I read it out loud and then a kid next to me started giggling.
Mm-hmm. Did you say fuck again for a while?
No, I think the next time I swore the first time when I was 18. Like intentionally said a swear word when I was 18.
Did it feel good?
I was like really nervous. It was like
What's your favorite swear word?
I mean, fuck's pretty good.
Yeah, fuck's pretty good.
Yeah.